Imagine you're at work or hanging out with a friend, and there's a guy who's like a big teddy bear. You guys become friendly, and this man is suddenly like the big brother that you've never had. He's always there for you, always making sure you're okay, always smiling. You trust him. Everybody trusts him. That is until one night when he should be leaving your apartment. You feel his hands wrap tightly around your neck. And it is at that moment when you realize that your sweet brotherly friend is nothing but the devil himself. Friends, today we're diving into the horrifying crimes of the only known serial killer in U.S. history to have personally known all of his victims. Henry Louis Wallace was a man hiding in plain sight, a friendly, seemingly ordinary employee working at fast food restaurants during the early 1990s. He was one of the most chilling serial killers. In Charlotte, North Carolina, they know him as the Taco Bell Strangler. Henry Louis Wallace was born on November 4th, 1965, in Barnwell, South Carolina. He was the son of Lottie Mae Wallace. Henry grew up with his mother, who worked long hours as a textile worker. She was verbally abusive, criticizing her son for everything, and letting him know he's the reason that his father left her. No one wanted him. No one loved him. So what happened was Lottie Mae Wallace was having an affair with a married man. And her and this married man had a daughter together, Henry's older sister. The married man continued to cheat on his wife with Lottie Mae. But when she got pregnant with Henry, the husband's like, you know what? This relationship or this little thing that we have going on, it's over. And Lottie Mae resented Henry after that. So after Henry graduated from high school in 1983, he became a DJ for a local radio station. And then in 1985, he joined the Navy, where he began experimenting with drugs, including crack cocaine. And then in 1987, he married his high school sweetheart. The following year, in 1988, he was honorably discharged from the Navy and also arrested for several burglaries in the Seattle area. It was around this time that he raped a woman for the first time. He also confessed that he was obsessed with sexual violence. So he goes to explain to the cops that when he was 9 years old, he was walking on a trail and he saw 3 older teenage boys pull a teenage girl into like the forest area. And he watched as they beat her up and all 3 of them raped this teenage girl. He was 9 and he said that it turned him on. In June of 1988, his wife asks him for a divorce. She told him that every time they had intercourse, it reminded her of when she was raped. Later on, when he's actually caught, he tells the cops that he ended up stalking her one time and considered raping her and killing her, but he just decided to take all his anger out on his victims. What's crazy is you had the Golden State Killer who blamed his ex-fiancée for the reason why he did pretty much the same thing as Henry Wallace. And then even with the Sacramento Vampire, he blamed his mom for the reason that he did what he did because he said that she didn't invite him to Christmas dinner. And now you have this guy blaming his ex-wife for the reason why he went and committed all of these murders and rapes. I find it strange how none of these men are taking accountability for their thoughts and for their actions. Every last one of them blamed a woman for the reason that they decided to become psychotic killers. Men, you guys got to do better, okay? You can't blame anyone. No one's going to look at you and be like, you know what? You're right. we find you not guilty for doing these horrendous crimes because it was actually the fault of these women. No, guy, it's you. Let's refocus. His first victim was Tashonda Bethia, who was an 18-year-old high school senior in Barnwell, South Carolina. Yes, friends, Henry Wallace's hometown. And this beautiful girl was killed on March 8th, 1990. Apparently, he had a crush on her and wanted to date her. So, friends, she's 18 years old in high school, and he's 7 years older than her. He's 25 years old, and he wants to date this high school student. I don't care if legally she's an adult because she's 18. 18 and 25 is a big age difference. I know it's only 7 years, but still, like, guy, like, you're closer to 30 and she's closer to being underage. She looks up to him like a big brother because his mother and her mother worked together. So they were like family friends. And she's not looking at him in any other way, like only as a big brother. Well, he doesn't take rejection well, and he ends up killing her. Her body was found floating in a pond by two fishermen on April 1st, 1990. Just less than a month after she was reported missing in March 1990. Henry Wallace was questioned in connection with her disappearance and murder, but was let off because there wasn't enough evidence to arrest him. 4 years later, when he confessed to killing 9 young Black women in Charlotte, he finally confessed to killing Miss Tashonda Bethia as well. To this day, he was never formally charged with her murder, even after confessing to the police about her death. As for her family, they were both relieved and saddened by the fact that it was someone they trusted. Tashonda was pretty, bright-eyed, with a bright future ahead of her, which was cut short by an evil monster whom she and her family trusted. Months later, in November 1991, Henry moves to Charlotte, North Carolina, and found multiple jobs in multiple fast food restaurants. His second victim was Sharon Lavette Nance, who was 32 years old. Henry Wallace used a rock to kill her after she demanded to be paid for sex, as she was a known sex worker and drug dealer. Sharon's body was found on May 27th, 1992. Her family remembered her as a kind and generous sister and daughter who drew, wrote poetry, and cared for her son. Between 1992 and 1994, Henry Wallace goes on to rape, strangle, and kill 9 more women. His third victim was 20-year-old Caroline Love. She shared an apartment with Sadie McKnight, who is Henry's girlfriend. Henry confessed that he made a copy of his girlfriend's apartment key, and when Caroline came home, he's like, I'm sorry, I'm just finishing up taking a shower. Sadie already left. I'm going to be at your hair in any moment. Well, Caroline isn't scared of Henry. Henry has never shown her any signs that he was less than a gentleman, okay? He always was like kind and caring. So her guard is completely down. She's like, all right, Henry, just finish up because, I just got home from work. Well, before you know it, Caroline had missed a day of work. Her boss calls up Caroline to see where she is, drives by her apartment because he's like, this is weird that she pulled a no call, no show. He sees her car parked in the apartment's parking lot. So he's like, okay, something must be going on. He calls her sister and leaves a note at Caroline's apartment. But still, another 24 hours goes by, Caroline is still MIA. Her sister Kathy goes to Caroline's apartment, leaves a note there, and still the following day, no one has heard from Caroline. Her sister, who is worried, reaches out to Henry Wallace because, just like Caroline, she trusted him. Kathy, Caroline Love's sister, and Henry Wallace, Caroline Love's murderer, go to the police department to report her missing. Yes, friends, the murderer reported his victim missing. How insane is that? So, her body was not found for almost 2 years, 21 months to be exact, after Henry Wallace was arrested. On March 13th, 1994, he finally confessed to the murder of Caroline Love and told the police where her body was. In February 1993, this guy is just killing left and right. So, in February 1993, 20-year-old Shauna Hawk became his fourth victim. She was living with her mom, Sylvia Sumter, and was a paralegal student at Central Piedmont Community College. But she also worked at the same Taco Bell as 28-year-old Henry Wallace. On February 19th, 1993, Sylvia Sumter came home and began to cook dinner. Her daughter's car was not there, but her coat and her purse were both in the closet, which was weird because it was freezing outside. So Sylvia is like, I wonder if she's with her boyfriend. So she calls up Shauna's boyfriend, Darrell Kirkpatrick, and was like, hey, is my daughter over there? And he's like, no, I haven't seen her all day. So she's like, you know what? Shauna was supposed to pick up her godson from daycare, but Shauna never showed up. So Sylvia calls Darrell back up, and Darrell's like, Miss Sumter, I'll be over there to comfort you, and maybe we can work together. So Darrell Kirkpatrick walks through the house, looking in each room, following his instincts. He enters the downstairs bathroom, and strangely, the shower curtain was outside the bathtub. So, out of curiosity, he pulls the shower curtain back, and lo and behold, there lay his girlfriend, Shauna Hawk, curled up and submerged in water. Darrell runs upstairs, tells her mom to call 911. Emergency services arrived, and they tried to resuscitate Shauna, but she was already dead. Like Caroline, Shauna had been raped and strangled by Henry Wallace. And friends, he's so full of himself, and he's like, I'm going to attend Shauna Hawk's wake. And at the wake, he acted like he was a concerned friend, like he didn't kill her. His fifth victim was 24-year-old Audrey Spain, who, just like Shauna, worked at the same Taco Bell as Henry. Audrey moved to Charlotte from a small town in South Carolina and had hopes of working with computers. On June 23rd, 1993, she was supposed to report to work at 6:30 p.m. at Taco Bell, but didn't show up. Her manager, Mark Lawrence, thought it was unusual because Audrey was always reliable. After work, he drives by Audrey Spain's apartment and he sees that her car is in the parking lot. So he calls her up and leaves a message on her answering machine. The next morning, June 24th, 1993, her manager, Mark, drove by her apartment again, and just like yesterday, Audrey's car was in the same spot. So he's like, you know what? Let me call her sister up. He calls her sister and leaves a message expressing his concern. And of course, Audrey did not show up for work that evening. He ends up calling 911 because he didn't hear from Audrey, nor did he hear from her sister. And on June 25th, 1993, 2 days after Mark became worried, the apartment's maintenance man entered her apartment through a sliding glass door and found Audrey Spain's body on the bed. Let's give it up for her manager, Mark Lawrence, because he really cared for her. And if he hadn't called 911, no one knows how long her body would have stayed there, And on the same day, he ended up stopping by her apartment again because he's really concerned. And an officer informed him that they had discovered her dead body in her apartment. We're going to fast forward now, 2 months later, to August 1993. 21-year-old Valencia Jumper was a senior at Johnson C. Smith University in Charlotte. She was friends with Henry's sister. And on the night of August 9th, 1993, she was raped and strangled by Henry, becoming his sixth victim. A friend of Valencia's, Zachary Douglas, said that he spoke with her on the phone about meeting later that night. She didn't show up, so Zachary went to her apartment in the early morning of August 10th, 1993. He noticed smoke coming from her apartment, so he turns the doorknob. Surprisingly, it was unlocked. And when he opens the door, he said that there was so much smoke. He then ends up asking one of her neighbors to call the fire department. What happened was Henry set her apartment on fire to make it look like she died in an accidental blaze. When firefighters arrived, they found Valencia Jumper's body in the bedroom of her apartment. The following month, September 1993, Michelle Stinson, a 20-year-old college student studying to be a graphic artist, becomes Henry's seventh victim. She lived in an apartment with her two young sons. Michelle Stinson was raped, strangled, and stabbed by Henry in front of one of her two young sons. She, like many of the other victims, was a friend of his from Taco Bell. Listen, with friends like this, you don't need enemies, because what the heck? This guy is a completely psychotic, evil man. So, on September 15th, 1993, Michelle's friend, James Mays, stops by her apartment to visit her and her sons. When he knocks on the door, no one answers. But he was able to hear the children knocking on the window and telling him that their mother was sleeping on the kitchen floor. He thought they were playing a game, but their mom was not answering. So James turns to leave when the oldest child comes out the back door and grabs him. James picks up the child and goes into the apartment with him. He sees his friend, Michelle Stinson, lying on the kitchen floor with blood around her. He picks up the phone, but quickly realizes that the cord had been cut or jerked out of the wall. He grabs her sons and asks neighbors to help him find a phone. He then calls the police. After he killed 20-year-old Michelle Stinson, Henry decides to take a break for a few months. And shortly after the holidays, on February 20th, 1994, he began spreading fear around Charlotte once again. Vanessa Mack was living in an apartment in Charlotte with her two young daughters. And on February 20th, 1994, at 25 years old, she became victim number 8. At 6 a.m. on February 20th, Barbara Rippey, the grandmother of Vanessa's oldest daughter, went to her apartment to pick up her youngest daughter, which was what she did every Sunday morning so Vanessa could go to work. When Barbara arrived and went to the back door, the door was ajar. She thought this was strange and called out to Vanessa, but Vanessa did not respond. Barbara cautiously enters the residence and notices Vanessa's 4-month-old baby lying on the couch, which again was unusual. Barbara Rippey walks to Vanessa Mack's bedroom and sees her feet hanging off the side of the bed. She later testified that Vanessa's feet were the only part of her body exposed and that they appeared gray and felt cold. Barbara called 911 and then picked up Vanessa's newborn daughter and went outside. When the authorities arrived, Officer Jeffrey Bumgarner observed a towel around Vanessa Mack's neck and blood coming from her nose, ears, and the back of her head. Officer Bumgarner also noticed a purse with its contents scattered on the bed. Vanessa Mack was sexually assaulted and strangled in her West Charlotte apartment. And, of course, Henry met Vanessa through his sister, who worked with him at Taco Bell. So, Henry told some people that he fell in love with Vanessa at first sight and was known to have doted on her 4-month-old baby, Natalia, who was left on the couch while he killed her mother. Henry, you're freaking sick. Like, don't love me that hard, please, okay? Don't be like, you know what? I love you today, but I'm gonna unalive you tomorrow. Please don't. Like, no one needs or wants that type of love. So on March 9th, 1994, which is a couple weeks after Henry killed Vanessa Mack, he kills 2 young women in one day. Guys, he is falling apart mentally. So, his ninth victim was Betty Bockham, who was sexually assaulted and strangled, just like all his other victims, right? Betty was a co-worker of Henry's girlfriend at Bojangles. That's so scary because so many sisters or girlfriends have boyfriends or brothers that they introduce to their friends. And once the friend gets to know this male counterpart, everybody, is friendly. Everyone's having a good time. It's like a big family. But Henry took that feeling. He took that trust and completely betrayed and violated it and did the most unthinkable acts. I really wish that I could find a way to talk to his therapist to see what was going on in his head. How long does the client doctor privilege last? Is there a statute of limitations on that? Because I want to know. So, like I said, Betty was a coworker of Henry's girlfriend's, and when she didn't show up to work, her unit director, Jeffrey Ellis, called her apartment several times but received no answer. Friends, can I just tell you, these managers and directors back in the day really cared for their employees. So when Jeffrey didn't receive an answer, he talked to some of Betty's coworkers, and no one had heard from her. He then called Betty Bockham's mom, who also had not heard from her. So now everyone's like, what the heck is going on with Betty, right? After Henry took her life, he stole her car. And the next morning, Jeffrey Ellis, her unit director, became increasingly worried because once again, Betty was on the schedule and she did not show up for work. Betty's mom nor her aunts have heard from her. So now Jeffrey's like, you know what? Let's go to her apartment. Maybe she's really sick and just couldn't pick up the phone. So Jeffrey Ellis and another employee drive to Betty Bockham's apartment to check on her. They knocked on the door and looked in the windows, and everything appeared normal. He then called Betty's mom again, and this time the two of them decide to contact the police department and report Betty as a missing person. On the morning of March 10th, 1994, Officer Gregory Norwood of the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department received a call to respond to an apartment where a young woman had been found not breathing. Maintenance personnel let Officer Norwood into the apartment where he found Betty Bockham's body lying face down on her bed with a towel around her neck. This scene looks just like the scene of Vanessa Mack. About an hour after Jeffrey Ellis called the police, he was approached by an officer in the parking lot of the Bojangles restaurant where they worked, and they advised him that unfortunately she was no longer with us. An autopsy was done on her body on March 11th, 1994. The medical examiner shared that she had blunt trauma injuries and had evidence of strangulation, including a ligature in place around her neck. Dr. Sullivan observed small abrasions and small contusions of the skin of the neck beneath the ligature, along with the abrasions over her left shoulder, on both arms, the right upper chest, and the abdomen. There was also a blunt trauma injury to the head with an area of abrasion over the right forehead. Dr. Sullivan testified that the injuries observed were consistent with a struggle. Betty Bockham fought back. And good for her, at least she gave this bastard a run for his money. Later that night, on March 9th, 1994, Henry goes back to the same East Charlotte apartment complex where Betty Bockham lived to sexually assault and strangle 18-year-old Brandy Henderson, who was the girlfriend of one of his best friends. And this young lady became victim number 10. Honestly, no female is safe around this friggin' psychopath. Not one. He's like, oh, you know what? You're my buddy's girlfriend. In my head, I'm thinking about what I'm going to do to you. Oh, you're my sister's coworker? I'm thinking about what I'm going to do to you. You're my sister's best friend? I'm thinking about what I'm going to do to you. What a lunatic. What makes this so much crazier than some of the other cases is the fact that every one of his victims cared about him. Every one of his victims knew him. Every one of them trusted him. Like, how do you just take all of that and act like it doesn't matter? So, Brandy Henderson was living in an apartment with her boyfriend, Vernis Lamar Woods, and their 10-month-old son. On March 9th, 1994, Vernis Lamar Woods was at the apartment taking care of the baby when Henry stopped by to tell him that he was going out of town. Around 5 o'clock in the evening, Vernis leaves to go to work, and Brandy's home alone with their baby. After her boyfriend went to work that evening, Brandy calls up her cousin, and while she's on the phone with her cousin, Henry Wallace comes by. According to Brandy's cousin, George, Brandy had invited Henry into the apartment while she was on the phone. George said he didn't know who Henry was at the time, but didn't worry because it seemed like Brandy trusted the person. Brandy Henderson held her 10-month-old son, Tyrese, during the assault by Henry. Henry told the police that he gave Tyrese a bottle and a pacifier, but the baby wouldn't stop crying. So he tied a pair of shorts around the baby's neck and choked him until he quieted down. This guy he was already losing it prior to this, but now you're killing babies or trying to kill babies. Just like I said about the Sacramento vampire killer, like bury him under the prison, give him a torturous death sentence, something, because now you've just like officially crossed a different line. Now you have kids involved. And it's bad enough that you've already killed moms in front of their children, but to do what you did while the mom was holding her baby and then to like almost kill her baby after you just killed her or while you were in the process of killing her. I have no words. But you're a special kind of evil. That's all I can say. So, her boyfriend Vernis returned home around midnight to find the front door unlocked, items scattered around the living room, and the stereo was missing. He then walked through the apartment. When he entered his baby's bedroom, he saw that his 10-month-old son, Tyrese, was sitting on the bed, gasping for air, with something white coming out of his mouth and a pair of shorts around his neck. This case is just so sad because there were just so many children involved. And, I read that back then, they just didn't have enough law enforcement, and they just didn't think that all of these cases were connected. Charlotte at the time wasn't the big city that it is today. There was still a lot of violence and just not enough manpower to deal with all of the violence. So I'm trying not to make excuses for why he continued killing before someone stopped him, but I'm just sharing with you what I read. So Vernis immediately ran to his son to remove the shorts, which were tied tightly around his neck. He then realized that his girlfriend Brandy was lying face down on the bed. He rolled her onto her back and saw that towels were tied around her neck and that her face was blue. Vernis removed the 2 towels from Brandy's neck and then called 911. When police officers did arrive, it was obvious that Brandy Henderson was dead, and of course, baby Tyrese was rushed to the hospital. Today, he is a survivor of the Taco Bell Strangler. Henry Wallace later told police that in Brandy's last moments, she got on her knees and prayed. Brandy's cousin George later shared that over the phone that night, Brandy repeatedly begged him to come by, but he was too tired. And now the guilt of not going over there haunts him to this day. The following day, Brandy's cousin George went to go find her boyfriend, Vernis. He ended up going to a mutual friend's apartment to see if That friend had heard from Vernis, and when he walked through the front door, he recognized a man on the couch. The man offered to make room next to him, but George found a spot on the floor to the left of the other man's feet. That man was Henry Wallace. And despicable Henry did not stop with Brandy Henderson. 3 days after she was murdered, he killed again. His 11th victim, who was also his oldest victim, was 35-year-old Deborah Ann Slaughter. Deborah was a co-worker of one of his ex-girlfriends. She was tall and strong, and just like Betty Bacom, Deborah fought back. Her friends remembered her for her laugh and sense of humor. They said that she had a beautiful singing voice, and she displayed it in church choir. On March 12, 1994, Henry Wallace sexually assaulted and stabbed her. She was his final victim. On March 11, 1994, Betty Bacom's vehicle was found by the police. Also, there was a handprint, a palm print, that was on the hood of her car. And when the police ran the prints, they found a match. And of course, they start looking into Henry's past. Now it's March 13th, 1994. And finally, this evil monster of a man is caught. He was arrested after the police found him hiding in the bathroom of a friend's apartment in East Charlotte. At approximately 10 p.m., Wallace was read his Miranda rights and then asked if he would agree to taping his confession. Henry Wallace nodded and replied that he already admitted to what he had done. And he said, "I feel like a big burden had been lifted."
I honestly believe that there was another Henry. One that I cannot control. There's the good Henry and the bad Henry.
The following day, on March 14th, 1994, after an all-night interrogation, followed by an early morning prayer with police, Henry Wallace began writing down the names of his victims. Police expected 3 or 4, but he gave them 10 names, excluding his first victim, Tashonda Bethia. The confession phase ended with Inspector Sanders asking Henry Wallace, "Why have you told us what you've done?" And Henry says, "I've wanted to tell the story for a long time. If I wouldn't have told you, if I wouldn't have stopped, the killing would have continued. And probably I would have killed myself as well. I've tried many times, but was unsuccessful."
As the years progressed, that side of me became bigger and stronger, and then that Henry took over. So I felt invincible.
On April 4th, 1994, Henry was officially indicted with 9 counts of murder, as well as a battalion of other charges, various counts of first and second degree rape, various counts of first and second degree sexual offense, various counts of assault with a deadly weapon, assault on a child under age 12, and several counts of robbery with a dangerous weapon. Henry Wallace's trial for murder took place at the Mecklenburg County Superior Courthouse, which lasted nearly 4 months from September 1996 to late January 1997, with the jury's judgment of death for the 9 Charlotte murders. Friends, I searched and searched for the reason why he wasn't tried for his first 2 murders. And unfortunately, I couldn't find anything. So if any of you know why he wasn't tried, I mean, I could speculate that maybe, he's already getting 9 life sentences. So maybe they didn't want to use tax dollars to have a second trial just to find him guilty again. That's my thinking, but I'm not 100% sure. So if any of you know anything, please leave a comment and let me know. All right. Thank you all so much for listening to another episode of Cold Blooded Serial. with your true crime bestie, Tika. If you liked this case, please be sure to subscribe, like, share, comment, and follow. And, I will talk to you all soon. Stay safe. Bye.